So I'm a little stuffy, so if I sound a little funny, well, listen to what I'm saying, not how I sound, okay? I'm going to continue on where Mike was going last week in the book of Joshua. So he got through Joshua 3 into 4 a little bit, so we're going to pick up in 4 and get into 5. So we'll start in Joshua 4, verse 1. So we got into this a little bit, but we'll go through a little bit of it again. Remember, they were needing to cross the Jordan. The Jordan was at flood stage. So if you needed to cross a river, the worst thing that could happen is it be flooded, right? So starting in verse 1, so he had separated. Everyone had started walking through. He told the people carrying the Ark of the Covenant to stay there until everyone was crossed. So while the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Choose 12 men from among the people, one of each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests were standing, and carry them over with you and put them down at the place where you stay tonight." So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, "Go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder according to the number of tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you in the future when your children ask you, 'What do these stones mean?' Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and when it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever." So the Israelites did as Joshua commanded them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of tribes of the Israelites, as the Lord had told Joshua. And they carried them over with them to their camp, where they put them down. Joshua set up the 12 stones that had been in the middle of the Jordan at the spot where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant had stood, and they are there to this day. Okay. So, picture this with me. You have a river to cross. It's flooded. It's the worst it can get. And God cut it off so they could pass through at ease. Okay, so make the river whatever you need to make it. Make it law, make it sin, make it your past. Whatever that river needs to be to you, make it that river. And God has cut it off so you can pass over to the promised land by just walking and listening to him. So, and that whole thing was a promise made by God. All he did was keep his promise. And the stones, they're not a memorial to the tribes who did something great, right? The stones are a memorial of God keeping his promise. It's nothing about the man and what they did. So the stones were a physical reminder of God's deliverance, one for each tribe. And they symbolize inclusion and unity in God's grace. All the tribes, one stone for each tribe. Everyone together. So the stone stood as a testament for future generations of God's kept promises. Now we're going to jump ahead to verse 20. And if you also think about why were they going? What was going on? Why are they leaving? Where are they? The promised land. What's so great about they were leaving slavery to get to the promised land. So you can also make that slavery whatever you want it, right? Slavery to sin, slavery to law, slavery to your past, whatever that needs to be to you. That's how the Bible speaks to you. It's going to speak to everyone a little bit differently. So picking up in verse 20, and Joshua set up at Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken out of the Jordan. And he said to the Israelites, in the future, when your descendants ask their parents, what do these stones mean? Tell them, Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over. The Lord your God did to the Jordan what he had done to the Red Sea when he dried it up before us until we had crossed over. He did this so that all the people of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear your Lord your God, the Lord your God. So the crossing wasn't just for Israel. Like I said, it was a show of the power of God and the love of God, and the Bible's always foreshadowing, right? So this could be foreshadowing the cross, entering into freedom, entering into a new covenant. There's a lot of foreshadowing that if you think about it as you go through it, you'll catch it. So that's all of chapter 4. We're going to go into chapter 5. And chapter 5 is kind of looking at they're in the promised land, but they're not yet victorious. Okay? They need a moment of preparation. Preparation spiritually, physically, emotionally, and that's the majority of what chapter 5 is about. And by the way, Joshua and Jesus, from Hebrew and Greek, they translate meaning the same thing. Okay? So Joshua comes from the word Yehoshua, and Jesus comes from the word Yeshua. Both of them mean salvation or God saves. So I thought that was cool. Okay, so we're going to start in verse 1. We're going to go 1 through 9. Now all the Amorite kings west of the Jordan and all the Canaanite kings along the coast heard how the Lord had dried up the Jordan before the Israelites until they had crossed over. Their hearts melted in fear, and they no longer had the courage to face the Israelites. At that time, the Lord said to Joshua, "Make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites again." So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the Israelites at Gibeath Haraloth. And now, this is why he did so. All of those men who came out of Egypt, all of the men of military age, died in the wilderness on their way after leaving Egypt. All the people that came out had been circumcised, but all the people born in the wilderness during the journey from Egypt had not. The Israelites had moved about in the wilderness 40 years until all the men who were of military age when they left Egypt died, since they had not obeyed the Lord, for the Lord had sworn to them that they would not see the land he had solemnly promised their ancestors to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. So he raised up their sons in their place, and these were the ones Joshua circumcised. They were still uncircumcised because they had not been circumcised on the way. And after the whole nation had been circumcised, they remained where they were in camp until they were healed. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you." So the place has been called Gilgal to this day. Okay, first, let's talk about circumcision a little bit. Everyone knows what that is, right? We all on the same page? Okay, cool. So they had been going through the wilderness for 40 years. So anyone who was born hadn't been circumcised yet because, you have to stop, you have to do that, and then you need some time to heal before you're walking, okay? So they waited until they got there, and because they needed that time to heal. This had been a ritual as a physical sign of God's covenant with Abraham back in Genesis 17. Okay, so circumcision is cutting away of the flesh, cutting off, right? The flesh doesn't grow back. It never comes back. Once it's gone forever. Okay? So let's keep that in mind. Let's go to Colossians 2, verse 11 and 12. Through our union with him, we have experienced circumcision of the heart. All of the guilt and power of sin has been cut away and is now extinct because of what Christ, the Anointed One, has accomplished for us. For we've been buried with him into his death. Our baptism into death also means we were raised with him when we believed in God's resurrection power, the power that raised him from death's realm. Okay, let's back up one verse. Through our union with him, we have experienced circumcision of the heart. Okay, so what has been cut away from your heart is never coming back. What has been cut away? All of the guilt and the power of sin has been cut away and is now extinct. Okay? It's been circumcised, it's been cut away, it's gone, and remember that flesh never grows back. It's gone. Okay, let's go back to Joshua 5:9. Okay, today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you. So this place has been called Gilgal to this day. Why? Why Gilgal? Does that make sense to anybody? Okay, well, if you look into it, because that's the first thing I did. Like, okay, it's rolled away. Why are you calling it Gilgal? I don't understand. Okay, but it's good to know what some of these words mean. The reproach of Egypt, to me, symbolizes slavery to sin, and that's made pretty clear. Gilgal means the circle of stones, or in the form of a verb, to roll. That's why it's called Gilgal. It means to roll. He has rolled away the reproach to Egypt. He has rolled away the slavery to sin. He's rolled it away, and you're entering into the promised land. In Christ, we're a new creation. We've had our heart circumcised. That's all gone. It's never coming back. Okay? So if we go to 2 Corinthians 5:17. Now, if anyone is enfolded into Christ, he has become an entirely new person. All that is related to the old order has vanished. Behold, everything is fresh and new. Okay, so the Israelites, when they had made it to where they were going, they had to circumcise themselves so they can identify with God. That's what they did. That's what their covenant. That was their rules, right? But when we are circumcised in Jesus, we are entirely a new person, and that is our identity with God. Okay? We are called to renew our identity as an entirely new person, set apart as his people. All right? All right, let's go to back to Joshua 5 to verse 10. On the evening of the 14th day of the month, while camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, the Israelites celebrated the Passover. And the day after the Passover, that very day, they ate some of the produce of the land, unleavened bread and roasted grain. The manna stopped the day after they ate this food from the land. There was no longer any manna for the Israelites, but that year They ate the produce of Canaan. So what's manna? Anyone know what manna is? It's what God provided while they were in the wilderness, and it rained from the heavens. So as soon as they got to the promised land and ate the produce of the promised land, the manna stopped. So God provides as you're on your walk when he needs. But then when you are able to take of the produce of the promised land that he has provided, he knows when he needs to stop providing you with stuff because you're provided with the promised land and the food of the promised land. Okay? I'm drawing some parallels here. We're in the promised land of Jesus, and we need to take that. He doesn't have to provide all this extra stuff for us because we're already there. We just have to eat in Jesus. So, go back to that verse. Okay, let's go to the next one. So remove every trace of your leaven of compromised with sin, that you might become new and pure again. For indeed, you are clean because of Christ. Our Passover lamb has been sacrificed for us. Okay, so when they got to the promised land, they celebrated Passover. Does anyone know when Jesus was crucified? So, when you look at that, and you look at when Jesus was sacrificed, and you go back to when these guys passed through the Jordan and into the promised land, they line up pretty close. And could we have a time in there where some things like this happened at the same exact time? Possibly. Right? So the first Passover in the Promised Land commemorated God's deliverance from Egypt. The shift from manna to the land's produce signifies a new season. God's provision changes as they enter his promise. All right, let's keep going. In Joshua 12. Let's keep going. Yeah. Let's go on to 13. Changing stuff on the fly. I like it. Now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied, "but as the commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. Now at the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the army will go up, everyone straight in." So Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it." And he ordered the army, "Advance, march around the city with an armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord." Okay. Numbers, I would, if you're going to study something this week, I would recommend studying 7. See how many different times 7 is mentioned in the Bible. And also I thought there's 12 tribes, 12 stones. Jesus had 12 disciples. There's a lot of places that numbers are all the same. Starting in 7, and he ordered the army, "Advance, march around the city with all armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord." When Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The armed guards marched ahead of the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. All this time the trumpets were sounding. But Joshua had commanded the army, "Do not give a war cry, do not raise your voices, do not say a word until I tell you, then shout." So we had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once. Then the army returned to the camp and spent the night there. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets went forward, marching before the ark of the Lord and blowing the trumpets. The armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord while the trumpets kept sounding. So on the 2nd day they marched around the city once, and they returned to the camp. They did this for 6 days. On the 7th day they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except on this day they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." The city and all that was in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. Now I find that interesting. So out of everybody in the city, we're going to spare the prostitute. Isn't that interesting? Why is that? It's because she hid the spies when they went in there. She did something for them, and it doesn't matter what she's done, what type of person she is. She helped them. So that's all that they see. So in the end, she gets spared. I think that speaks volumes. Just like I said, let the river Jordan be whatever it is to you, whether it's your past, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, let it be that to you. The prostitute was spared because she had listened and she had helped them along their journey. And as they go in and they're doing all this stuff, they're not doing anything that they've come up with. They're just following instructions. And sometimes we need to quiet down a little bit and just follow instructions. We can see that. Okay. Go ahead, next verse. But keep away from the devoted things, so that you will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise, you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. All of the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord and must go into his treasury. And when a trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and the sound of the trumpet, when all the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed, so everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men, women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. Joshua said to the 2 men who had spied out the land, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring her out and all who belong to her in accordance with your oath to her." So the young men who had done the spying went in and brought out Rahab, her father and her mother, her brothers and sisters, and all who belonged to her. They brought out her entire family and put them in a place outside of the camp of Israel. Then they burned the whole city and everything in it, and they put the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. But Joshua spared Rahab and the prostitute with her family and all who belonged to her, because she hid the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. So they didn't just spare her and leave her, they brought her in with them. Isn't that crazy? A prostitute. You would think that, that might have been the least person that they were worried about. That was just a prostitute's house. Go ahead. No. They took her in with them, and she lived with them, with her whole family. Okay. At that time, Joshua pronounced the solemn oath, "Cursed before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild this city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn son, he will lay its foundations. At the cost of his youngest, he will set up its gates." So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. Okay. So again, all that they did was just follow God's word. Chapter 4, if I had to sum it up in like one sentence, I would say that God's grace leads us through impossible barriers, leaves a legacy of remembrance, and points to Jesus. So he said, you're going to cross the river, you're going to go into the promised land. Oh, by the way, the river is at flood stage. It's literally the worst it could ever be for you to cross it. He cut it off and stopped it so they could pass through to where they had been promised. It didn't matter that it was at flood stage. And then told them to gather the 12 stones and put them on the other side. Take it right from where the priests were standing, take them to the other side in remembrance of what has happened. Again, not a remembrance of what the men did or any fleshly work. It was in remembrance of what God had promised and what he did. And in Joshua 5, God prepares us in grace and renews our identity in celebrating our deliverance through Christ, who is our Joshua. So if you look at it, Christ is our Joshua. Jesus is who's bringing us through the Jordan to the promised land. He did it on the cross. And as we cross into the promised land, the provisions that have been provided when needed, once you start to eat the fruit of the promised land, they stop because you don't need them anymore. As you step with Jesus in the new covenant, he will provide you the food. All right. We can either stop or keep going into 6. What do you guys want to do? All right, let's start in 6. All right, now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went in and no one came out. Yes, that's what I meant. All right. But the Israelites were unfaithful in regard to the devoted things. Achan, son of Carmi, and son of, this is going to be rough, Zimri. Yeah, I'll just start flinging things out there. The son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of them. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel. Now Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai. Sure, we'll go with it. Which is near Beth Aven, to the east of Bethel, and told them, "Go up and spy out of the region." So the men went up and spied out of Ai. When they returned to Joshua, they said, "Not all the army will have to go up against Ai. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men to take it, and do not weary the whole army, for there are only a few people live there." So about 3,000 went up, but they were routed by the men of Ai, who killed about 36 of them. They chased the Israelites from the city gate as far as the stone quarries and struck them down on the slopes. At this, the hearts of the people melted in fear and became like water. Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down to the ground before the ark of the Lord, remaining there until evening. The elders of Israel did the same and sprinkled dust on their heads. And Joshua said, "Alas, sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. Pardon your servant, Lord. What can I say now that Israel has been routed by its enemies? The Canaanites and the other people of this country will hear about this, and they will surround us and wipe out our name from the earth. What then will you do for your own great name?" Okay, so this is kind of interesting. We've delivered into the promised land. We get over here, and it's like, and then we get our butts kicked. It's like, oh, hold on a second. Why are you going to do us like that? We just crossed the Jordan, and the walls of Jericho have collapsed. What's going on here? Do we ever feel like we get to that point sometime? You ever just have one of them days, you're just like, why? We all have those days, right? It happens, but you have to find the good in it. Well, we'll keep reading. The Canaanites and the other people of the country, go ahead, next one. The Lord said to Joshua, "Stand up. What are you doing down on your face? Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant, which I commanded them to keep. They have taken some of the devoted things they have stolen. They have lied, and they have put them in their own possessions. That is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies. They turn their backs and run because they have been made liable to destruction. I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy whatever among you is devoted to destruction. Go, consecrate the people. Tell them, consecrate yourselves in the preparation for tomorrow, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. There are devoted things among you, Israel. You cannot stand against your enemies until you remove them. In the morning, present yourselves tribe by tribe. The tribe the Lord chooses shall come forward clan by clan. The clan the Lord chooses shall come forward, family by family, and the family the Lord chooses shall come forward, man by man. Whoever is caught with the devoted things shall be destroyed by fire, along with all that belongs to him. He has violated the covenant of the Lord and has done an outrageous thing in Israel. Early the next morning, Joshua had Israel come forward by tribes, and Judah was chosen. The clans of Judah came forward, and the Zerarites were chosen. They had the clan of the Zerarites come forward by families, and Zimri was chosen. Joshua had his family come forward man by man, and Achan, son of Carmi, and son of Zimri, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, was chosen. And Joshua said to Achan, my son, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, and honor him. Tell me what you have done. Do not hide it from me. Achan replied, it is true. I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I have done. When I saw the plunder of beautiful robe from Babylonia, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them. They are hidden in the ground inside my tent with the silver underneath. So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran into the tent, and there it was, hidden in the tent with the silver underneath. They took the things from the tent, brought them to Joshua, and all the Israelites spread them out before the Lord. Then Joshua, together with all the Israel, took Achan, son of Zerah, silver, the robe, the gold bar, his sons and daughters, his cattle, donkeys, and sheep, and tent, and all of that he had to the valley of Achor. Joshua said, why have you brought this trouble on us? The Lord will bring trouble on you today. Then all of Israel stoned him, and after they had stoned the rest, they burned them. Over Achan they heaped up a large pile of rocks, which remains to this day. The Lord turned from his fierce anger, therefore the place had been called the Valley of Achor ever since. Then the Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid, do not be discouraged. Take the whole army with you and go up and attack Ai. For I have delivered into your hands the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land. You shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king, except that you may carry off their plunder and livestock for yourselves. Set an ambush behind the city. So Joshua and the whole army moved out to attack Ai. He chose 30,000 of his best fighting men and sent them out at night. And these orders, listen carefully, you are to set an ambush behind the city. Do not go very far from it. All you have to be on alert. I and all those with me will advance on the city, and when they come out against us, as they did before, we'll flee from them. And they will pursue us until we have lured them from the city, for they will say, they are running away from us as they did before. So when we flee from them, you are to rise up from ambush and take the city. Your Lord God will give it into your hand. So, again, they're just doing what they're told. Their covenant is different than where we live today. But the main thing I want to get at is that the slavery to sin as they're going into the wilderness to be delivered to the promised land has been rolled away. Our identity in Him is new. We are in the promised land. Obviously, the promised land during this time and our promised land are two totally different things. God provides when we need Him to provide. And then whatever you need your river to be, let it be that, and let God cut it off. I hope that speaks to somebody in here. And you have been circumcised, your heart has been circumcised by Jesus. And once that flesh is cut away, it never comes back. And when I also like to, I thought it was interesting that they wander the wilderness for 40 years. God stops the Jordan River. They cross over, and they're like, okay, hold on. We've been wandering for 40 years. We've got to take a break, re-identify ourselves, and, do all the circumcision and stuff. The hill that is there that they did it on, if you do some research on it, it's called something pretty funny, but I'll let you research that on your own. Okay. But they cross over. They take the time to re-identify themselves before they do anything else. Luckily for us, we don't have to continuously re-identify ourselves. We don't have to reaffirm ourselves during a certain amount of time. We are in Him, and He is in us always. We have been totally set free since the day on the cross from the foundations of the earth for past, present, and future. So keep that in mind. You've been set free. Your heart has been circumcised forever. I do want to leave a little bit of time here at the end today for any prayer that's needed. Anyone who needs prayer is welcome to come up after we get the live stream shut off, and we'll have people to pray together. Those of you who have watched online, we thank you. We appreciate your support and everything that you've done. Thanks.